So I'm back from Summer Game Fest, and I had the opportunity to try out Stranger Than Heaven, RGG Studios' seeming magnum opus of a Yakuza game that is really ambitious for them, focusing on a character in 5 different periods of his life, which I think spanned like 50 years. It's got Snoop Dogg, a bunch of well-known actors, and also Tupac for some reason, and I don't know how I feel about that. But while I was at Summer Game Fest, they had a really cool setup with like some drum set and ambient lighting and old-fashioned memorabilia and everything.
Damn, they went all out for this.
Led to a cool photo op. I gave them my best Tojo Clan subsidiary look there.
I am the penguin of Tojima.
But the cool thing was that we got to actually sit down and try out the game. What we ended up playing was basically just the battle system. There wasn't any real exploring or doing any of the cool create your own music stuff. It was mostly just showing off the game's brand new combat system, because the combat in this game is vastly different from any other Yakuza game. And I'm someone who's pretty much played almost all of them at this point, minus like 2, or actually no, 3. So I'm pretty well versed in how Yakuza games play. And this game is definitely going for something really different. So the way this demo that they had us play functioned was, it was essentially 3 different combat scenarios that take place in 3 different time periods for the main character, Makoto Daito. There was 1915, which was the beginner level fights, 1929, acting as the intermediate fights, and then 1943, acting as the advanced fights. So 1915 has you just against a group of pretty regular generic guys. Very likely the dudes you'll be fighting through most of the series. While the 1929 one had a bunch of guys, plus a really, really big beefy dude who loved to charge at you and had a shit ton of armor. And the 1943 one was essentially just this one samurai guy who had also a shit ton of health, an actual fuck you move where he could just instantly KO you. To be honest, I never actually killed this guy. So unlike Yakuza games of the past where you essentially just kind of button mash, you know, with square, square, triangle, or triangle, triangle, or doing a grab and then throw into a heat action, the game functions with basically you controlling each of your limbs here. The RB or the R trigger control your right arm, and the LB and the L trigger control your left arm. You guard by holding B and can choose to guard left or right with the LB or RB. And you can dodge with A, which is pretty similar to the previous Yakuza games. But you can also choose a direction, whether it's like left or right, which can be good for dodging like vertical strikes. So the idea is that you can actually, by controlling each limb, it sort of pushes you to not just press one button again and again, but instead encouraging you to hit right, then left, then right, like a natural swing of your arms. It took me a while to get used to because I was so used to just, you know, mashing one button. And it did feel sort of odd also just hitting the triggers or the bumpers like to do attacks like this. I mean, even in Souls games, which have you usually attack with the like RB or RT, the other side usually is the block one, unless you're doing a dual wielding sword build. And Makoto's attacks are relatively kind of slow. Even when he doesn't have a weapon equipped, he really winds those fucking strikes up. And I think he might have even been able to actually charge his attacks, maybe? I don't know. Memory's a little fuzzy on that one. We also did get an option to use a knife in one hand, which also led to an interesting thing where you think you just mash the RB then to use the knife, but it was actually faster to stab with the knife and then hit with the left hand. So you're again alternating between the two. And then the other weapon you used was this crowbar, this 2-handed crowbar, which I'm gonna be honest, I didn't like very much. It was really, really, really slow. And I feel like it didn't really do that much more damage than some of my other stuff. Seems like it should have also hit more enemies around me, but it kind of didn't. I used the crowbar for maybe all of 1 or 2 minutes before I said, nah, I'm good. Also, when you knocked an enemy down, if you hit LT and RT, you could basically run over and leap on top of them and start punching on them. And if you hit LT and RT just on your own, you'll do a rush grab on a standing opponent and try to throw them onto the ground. They're also perfect parries. So like I said before, if you hold the B button, you would actually assume a guard stance. But if you watch the enemy and you block the arm that they're using to attack you with your corresponding arm, so essentially if they hit you with their right hand, you hold up your left hand. If you tap it just as they strike you, you get a perfect parry, which basically just opens up an opportunity to land a counter strike. And I will say, very satisfying, and it looks and sounds really good when it happens. There's also a perfect dodge, though I found this one to be a lot less reliable. especially if you time your dodge to the last second and you manage to dodge the correct way. I found it was much easier against like a vertical strike, that it gives you another sort of cool slow-mo and get an opportunity to attack them. There's also a thing where you can get grabbed, like one of your arms gets grabbed. You actually use your other hand to then punch the person in the face to try to get them off you. And while it doesn't actually appear in this footage, at least as far as I can tell, there is also this mechanic of essentially either knocking the enemy to the ground, right? Where, like I said, you hit LT and RT, but there's also, it's actually possible for that to happen to you if you get hit too many times. In the bottom left, you can see this little ring that essentially is your stamina. And basically, the more yellow and red it gets, the lower it's getting. And the same thing happens to your enemies who also have that thing of stamina. So if it ends up getting to the red, they get knocked down or you get knocked down. If you get knocked down, you have to wait for it to recharge before you can get back up again. So you're sort of lying on the ground and you have to actually dodge out of the way of attacks, which was a little weird at first. I didn't really understand what was going on. Like, one of the guys on the show floor had to sort of explain to me what it wanted me to do, but you essentially just dodge while the enemy tries to attack you when you're on the ground until it recharges and you can get back up again. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any of that actually in the footage, which sort of surprised me here in this B-roll. But it did happen to me quite a few times. So yeah, it's a much more methodical game than what Yakuza generally ever did. Yakuza comparatively is much more arcadey, and this one seems like it's trying to go for sort of a realistic feel. Like, you really actually want to be paying attention to your enemy's attacks and not just like dashing around like a madman. And to be honest, the dash of this game is not that good. I found the dodge to be way less reliable than the parry mechanic, and you can't really seem to chain them together. I even had times where I managed to dodge an attack, but then if they followed up with another one immediately after, I just kind of got hit. I spent a lot of time trying to see what was good and everything, but even the guy on the show floor told me that, yeah, it's better just to block stuff than try to dodge. The only downside to blocking is that if you don't get like a perfect parry for it, or a perfect block, you get hit too many times and it starts to knock away your stamina, leading you to getting knocked down. But it's a very interesting fighting system. However, the real question that you might be asking then is, all right, well, how does it feel? And I'm gonna be absolutely real with you. For the first probably 10 to 15 minutes that you're trying to play this, it does not feel that good. I'm not gonna lie. And I was not the only one to think this. Every other person I talked to said the exact same thing. The game feels at times unresponsive. Now, this is likely a very early build of the game, and it's hopefully going to go through some polish, but in the current state it was in, I felt like a lot of my inputs were getting eaten. The input buffer just seemed really small, and you would get locked into animation all the time, just because your character is so slow. And man, oh man, is Makoto Daido a heavy bitch. It was something I noticed even in the trailers of how grounded and heavy he seemed to be when fighting versus Kiryu, who dashes around like a madman. And you definitely feel it in the game as well. It's one of the reasons why I really didn't like the crowbar out of all the weapons, because it made the slow attacker even slower. And if you're like me and you're coming off of playing Yakuza, this game feels considerably more difficult to control. Now, I did start to get used to it the more I played it, but I can't ever say it's felt specifically great. Some of the problems I had were, for example, there is no lock-on in this. There's sort of a soft lock-on if you're facing towards an opponent, but enemies can come over and just sort of whack you in the back without you seeing them. And I also had this problem with the advanced scenario where you're fighting that samurai guy. It's not in any of this footage, and I wish I could show it, but it happened to me, I swear to God, like a dozen times, where this dude would do certain attacks, and if I was too close to him, he would essentially dash right by me, missing me, and going directly 180 behind me. So then I had to slowly turn my camera around to face him. The Yakuza games always had like at least some form of lock-on where you essentially hold R1 to enter a stance and face a opponent, but there's really nothing like that here. And then when you had a lot of groups of enemies attacking you, I had quite a few times where I would either like knock an enemy to the ground, start punching on him, and then some dickhead would just come over and slap me in the face, or I'd be sidewinded from some dude just off screen that I couldn't see. I do think the perfect parry mechanic is really cool and actually is very satisfying to pull off. But the enemies, at least in this build that we played, were incredibly tanky. Like, they took a lot of hits to die, especially the big guys. This might have been done intentionally just to give us, you know, enough time to engage with them. But I feel like the actual feeling of attacking enemies didn't have the sort of visceral like crunch of previous Yakuza fights, right? Again, this feels like it really is trying to go more for realism. But the problem with realism when it comes to fights, when you're getting fist meets face, is that hitting someone, it's actually kind of a hollow hit, right? Just kind of like a And as a result, it just kind of lacks some of that really good sounds, you know? I kind of missed that from the Yakuza games. It's not like the audio design was bad, but it just, again, was a different take. I think I personally would have preferred that they tried to keep some of that like really beefy sound audio design because it makes shit feel so visceral. But the game is violent, I will say. With you stabbing dudes with knives and fucking blood just gushing out, which is pretty neat. Though I think they might have actually toned it down from even some of the reveal trailers. I remember the initial reveal for this game being insanely gory. But yeah, the actual like feeling of controlling your character, and just because even his movement is just so slow, it doesn't feel great. It gets better the more you play it, but I think the thing they really need to work on is just the responsiveness of the controls. And I also think the game just could greatly use some kind of lock-on mechanic. And that was probably the thing I told them that was my biggest gripe, because just enemies just constantly, even in one-on-one fights, would just like end up behind you and you just like lose track of them. I also think the game could just afford to be sped up just a bit, just with like regular attacks. Even just like the lightest, most basic attacks could be just a bit faster. Because as it is, you just feel so heavy, man. I will also say that I think the game's art style is really good. Like, I love the look of the environments, the character design, and everything. But this is definitely one of the crunchier looking Dragon Engine games that I've seen. I don't know what it is exactly, but this game is mad crunchy. I'm thinking all the post-processing and stuff they've been doing in this game must really be taking a toll on it, because this game can feel sort of surprisingly kind of low resolution compared to even to fucking Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is like 7 years old at this point. I'm sure that will likely look better as time goes on, as they continue to polish it over and improve performance and everything. I think it probably looks like this mainly because they just wanted to run a consistent frame rate, which it did. But yeah, it's a very different battle system. And I do hope that they take people's feedback to heart, because I was unfortunately not the only one that felt this way. Almost every other person I talked to said that this game felt very odd and not particularly super good. It didn't leave a great first impression. But I do want to say that I do really respect them for not just doing the same thing that they've been doing for, God, so many years, right? The action battle system that has extended now beyond even just Yakuza over into the Judgment series as well, right? With the style changes and the square triangle and the go into super move, hit a bunch of guys. Like, it's fun, don't be wrong, right? Like, that is a great system. But I think it's cool that they're really trying to make this different, make it stand on its own and come up with a new wild system. But it definitely needs some adjusting and tinkering before I get to a point where I feel like people will vibe with it. And I want this to do well, all right? I want the battle system in this game to give me the similar feelings that I get from the previous Yakuza games. You know, I want to feel like a badass. I want to feel like I'm being challenged, but also can still have fun just mogging on enemies when I want to. Also note that we don't really have any access to any upgrade systems, so we don't really know what that looks like either, or what potential combos and new things we could unlock for our characters. We did see in the trailers that there was like a weapon system, and you could also upgrade those weapons and make them better. But I hope there's also like some kind of skill tree for like Makoto to actually give him maybe new moves and things like that. Otherwise, if it's just the weapons, I feel like the combat itself would start to probably wear thin pretty quickly. Part of the fun of the Yakuza games was actually like unlocking new moves and having like these huge like skill trees or skill lists that you would continue to unlock as you made your way throughout the entire game. But I have faith. I think they'll get this to a point where it at least is satisfying to engage with enemies. And I think it was a smart thing to do to have this here at Summer Game Fest, because I think they probably knew that this maybe wasn't quite where it needed to be. And by doing this, they at least allows them to get the feedback they need to maybe get this in a direction that will lead people with a good feeling. But yeah, that is my thoughts so far on Strangers in Heaven, at least its combat system. I do wish that they had a little more that I could have checked out outside of the combat, but I think the combat was something that they really just wanted to get our feedback on. Because the rest of it is stuff that, let's be honest, RGG has already done a lot of times with, you know, a myriad of different side activities and some kind of business that lets us make a bunch of money, right? Which, hey, that's kind of the magic of these games. But this game releases in January, and I'm still really looking forward to it. That's still quite a bit of time for them to adjust and tinker with things. I'm still wondering how the time period system of the game is going to work, right? Like, will we be able to hop back and go to previous, like, periods in the past? Because, like, I'm sure there's going to be, like, side quests and sub-stories that are specific to each era. Not to mention, I think every time period takes place in a brand new city as well. But yeah, man, it's very cool. You definitely expect that when we eventually get to that release date, that there will be a Let's Play of this game. Absolutely. And I think that the art, again, even though the actual graphical fidelity of this game is a little crunchy at times, I think this game's art style is potentially one of RGG's best looking in the series. It's got a real looking style to it that really makes it stand out on its own. Now, if only we could get them to release that fucking song!
Stranger than hell.